The coffee cup fell to the floor and a part of the brain fell with it. Mr. Raymond, 68 years old, living in a quiet suburb of Minnesota. A calm, punctual man, who made coffee for himself and his beloved wife every morning. No serious underlying conditions, no smoking, no complaints to anyone. He often told the neighbors, waking up early, hot coffee, sunlight through the window, that's healthy enough. That morning was just like any other. 6:18 a.m. He got out of bed, put on a thin robe, walked straight to the kitchen, and turned on the coffee machine. His hand reached for the ivory ceramic mug, the one with the words "Good mornings start with calm hearts." A gentle message he read every day, not knowing that today would be different. Steam began rising from the kettle. The smell of coffee slowly filled the small kitchen. Raymond reached for the sugar, but his hand froze. His right hand began to tremble. Hard. Then very hard. The cup slipped from his hand and crashed onto the tile floor. The loud shatter. Mrs. Martha, his wife, just stepped out of the bathroom, rushed in panic. And she froze. Raymond was unsteady. His eyes were clouded. One side of his mouth began to droop. He tried to say something, but no sound came. Only a faint breath. Then his body collapsed sideways, hitting the kitchen cabinet. Mrs. Martha screamed and called 911. 15 minutes later, the ambulance arrived. I was the one who received Mr. Raymond at the hospital that morning. I'm a geriatric specialist, with over 30 years of experience in brain health for older adults. I've witnessed many stroke cases, but this one left a strange feeling inside me. It was too silent. Too sudden. And could have been prevented. Just a few hours later, when the brain scan appeared before me, I went silent. I saw the scan of his brain. And it held me still for 30 seconds. Not because of the extent of the damage, but because the cause of that damage began from something so simple. The brain scan froze me even though he thought he was fine. I've seen thousands of brain scans in my 30 years working in geriatrics. Some showed clear damage, massive bleeding, or vessels burst open like a storm had passed. But Mr. Raymond's brain was different. No hematoma. No blunt trauma. No acute bleeding. Just a faint dark gray patch in the left frontal lobe, the area responsible for language and speech reflexes. The clearest detail lay in the tiny blood vessels surrounding that area. They were nearly blocked like a stream clogged by layers of long dried mud. Not due to high cholesterol. Not because of a blood clot traveling from the heart. But because that very blood had thickened little by little, over countless dry mornings. When I asked the nurse, Mrs. Martha, his wife, was sitting in the hallway, pale as a sheet. I gently asked her about her husband's morning routine. She answered, "He gets up and makes coffee right away. Doesn't eat. Doesn't drink anything else." I once told him to drink water first, but he said, "I'm fine, I've never passed out before." That sentence made me pause. I'm fine. That's the sentence I hear most from patients right before or just after a stroke. They trust how they feel. But the brain doesn't need them to feel, it only needs to be cared for quietly and correctly. I looked at the brain scan once more. And I knew. That morning, if Mr. Raymond had just done one thing differently, drunk a glass of warm water in the first 10 minutes after waking up, the entire episode might never have happened. Because you can feel fine. But for the brain, even a few minutes without enough blood is enough to leave a permanent scar. And the most dangerous moment is often the one right after you first open your eyes. The most dangerous moment for the brain is when you first open your eyes. Morning for many people is a time of sunlight, of awakening, of new beginnings. But for the brain, especially in older adults, it's actually the most dangerous time of the day. I don't say this to scare you. I say it because I've witnessed too many patients collapse just minutes after waking up, and many of them thought they were perfectly healthy. Why is morning so dangerous? After a long night, on average 6 to 8 hours without eating or drinking, the body enters a state of mild dehydration that goes unnoticed. The heart slows down during sleep. Blood pressure drops. And the blood thickens, like honey left in the fridge overnight. Meanwhile, the brain doesn't sleep. It still consumes oxygen, still needs blood, still maintains stable temperature. The difference is, it's been working all night with less fuel. When you open your eyes in the morning, your body needs a transition period to shift from rest to activity. But if you suddenly sit up, get out of bed, walk around, make coffee, without rehydrating, the blood flow to your brain doesn't return to normal in time. And within the first 15 minutes after waking up, the risk of stroke is twice as high as at any other time of day, especially for those over 60. We don't feel it because stroke doesn't hurt right away. It's not like a heart attack where you can't breathe. It's just one arm suddenly weak, one word you can't pronounce, one strange sensation on your face, and then everything slips out of control in a matter of seconds. I call that moment the dangerous silence, because the body sends no alarm. But the brain's blood vessels are straining, struggling to push thickened blood into the very place that needs to be nourished first each day. And then, I remember another man. Same age. Same peaceful lifestyle. But he changed one small thing. And that change allowed him to open his eyes each morning with a brain that felt refreshed. Mr. Harold only added 1 glass of water and his mornings completely changed. I clearly remember Mr. Harold, an elderly patient I had been seeing regularly for many years. He lived alone in a small town in Utah. Every morning, he would wake up at 6, turn on the radio to catch the news, take a walk around his house, and then eat breakfast. He didn't smoke, didn't drink. His blood pressure was just slightly elevated, basically a nearly ideal senior in the eyes of medicine. But what puzzled me was this: every time he came for a checkup, he would say the same thing: "Doctor, every morning I feel a bit dizzy, my head feels cloudy, like I'm not fully awake yet. I checked everything. Eyes? Fine. Heart? No arrhythmia. Brain scans? No visible damage." He wasn't anemic, nor hypoglycemic. Everything pointed to just one thing: he hadn't noticed, his body was thirsty every single morning. I asked gently, "Do you drink water right after waking up?" He shook his head, "Probably not until an hour later. I wake up and walk around first to get going, then I eat and drink." I looked at him and said something I would also say to you: if you're over 60, morning isn't just time to get your body moving. It's the moment for blood to thin out, for the brain to recover, and for those tiny blood vessels to not have to struggle like pushing sand through a dry straw. A warm glass of water right after waking not only helps you feel more alert, but is the first thing that brings your brain back to safety. Mr. Harold stayed quiet, then nodded. 2 weeks later, he returned. Not a single complaint this time. He said, "I keep a bottle of warm water by my bed. Every morning when I wake up, I sit up and take the first 3 sips. No more foggy head. My walks feel lighter. My mind feels clearer. It seems I was just missing something so simple it almost got forgotten." That sentence made me smile. Because in 30 years of practice, I've realized, the most miraculous changes don't always come from prescriptions, but from timing the right habit. That sentence made me smile. Because in 30 years of practice, I've realized, there are things we search for in medicine but forget right there in the glass of water next to our bed. So, what makes something as simple as drinking warm water cause such a big difference? It's not just water. It's a biological signal, quiet, subtle but vitally important to the brain. And to truly understand it, you need to look deep into the smallest blood vessels inside yourself. Warm water is not just water, it's a biological signal for life. Have you ever thought? A glass of warm water in the morning could be the first thing that helps your brain switch back on after a long night. I know. It sounds too simple. But give me a few minutes, and I'll tell you something most people overlook, even those who drink water diligently every day. After waking up, the body enters a state of mild dehydration. We haven't eaten or drunk anything for 7-8 hours. Sweat evaporates during the night, heart rate slows down, temperature drops and blood vessels constrict. At this moment, the blood becomes thicker. Flow slows down. The brain, which has no energy reserves, has to make do with limited oxygen. It doesn't speak up. No pain. No alarms. Just quietly keeps running. Or not. And this is exactly when warm water acts as a biological signal. Not simply for hydration, but to gently dilate blood vessels that constricted overnight. When warm water goes down the esophagus, it stimulates thermoreceptors, activating the parasympathetic nervous system. The body begins to loosen up. Heartbeat becomes steadier. Blood flow relaxes, vessels gently expand and blood reaches the brain more smoothly. I call it a gentle awakening for your circulatory system. You could drink cold water, iced drinks, or coffee right after waking. But all those choices act as strong stimulants, making the heart race, vessels tighten, blood pressure spike. The brain doesn't need a rude awakening. It needs softness like warm water. And this isn't just theory. Multiple studies have shown. With just 300 milliliters of warm water in the morning, cerebral blood flow can increase by an average of 14% within 10 minutes. A small number, but enough to prevent temporary blood shortage in one area of the brain, avoiding a minor stroke, the kind that often goes unnoticed. I once told a patient, if you care about your memory, your speech, and your ability to stay balanced every day, then a warm glass of water is your way of saying I love you to your brain. But what haunts me the most isn't those who never heard of warm water, but those who already knew, had been reminded, yet for one seemingly harmless reason. They made the wrong choice in just the first 10 minutes. And in that very short window of time, I've witnessed someone lose half their face and a part of their memory. You'll want to know, because that story could be any of us tomorrow. Kind mistakes quietly bringing you closer to a stroke. I once followed a patient named Eliza, living in the state of Oregon. She lived with her husband, a thoughtful, organized woman who loved her family deeply. Every morning, she woke up about 30 minutes before her husband, always prepared breakfast carefully with fresh juice, a hot cup of coffee, and toasted bread. Her kitchen was always tidy, filled with a scent of cinnamon and kindness. There was only one thing she didn't do. She didn't drink water, not even a sip, in the first 90 minutes after waking up. Not because she didn't know. I had reminded her of it many times. But she always smiled and said, I'm busy making breakfast for my husband. I'll drink water when I'm done with everything. And then, one morning in March, she sat down at the table, holding her coffee cup, barely managed to say one sentence, I feel a bit dizzy. Then came silence. The left side of her face began to droop. Her tongue stiffened. Her right hand trembled, then dropped the spoon. She experienced a transient ischemic attack, a minor stroke. A few minutes later, she recovered almost completely. But her speech slowed down. Some words never came back. And the look in her eyes at our next follow-up still carried quiet regret. She wasn't wrong. She was simply kind in her own way. But that kindness forgot herself. I'm telling this not to blame her. I'm telling it so that you, the one reading this, won't repeat a gentle but dangerous mistake. Because the truth is, the brain doesn't need you to drink water because you're thirsty. The brain needs you to drink water before anything else enters your bloodstream. A good cup of coffee can't thin your blood. Fruit juice with sugar doesn't dilate vessels. And if you wait until you're free to drink, it might already be too late. Eliza didn't forget to drink water. She just placed it after everyone else. And sadly, the brain doesn't wait as long as we think. So if you've ever delayed that simple act, then let me show you how to begin again, with a small morning ritual, less than 3 minutes but possibly the deciding moment between clarity and an unannounced crisis. Just 3 minutes each morning, unleashing the flow to the brain. I don't know about you, but for me, mornings are when it's easiest to forget myself. The moment I open my eyes, I think about who to call, what to eat, what news to check, rushing into everything except the one thing my body truly needs. The body doesn't need coffee first. Doesn't need the loud alarm ringing. It just needs a stream of warm water and 3 quiet minutes to find its rhythm again. I remember a conversation with Mr. Malcolm, an elderly friend I truly cherish. He used to feel lightheaded every morning, thinking it was just age, just natural. But when he started trying the 3-minute ritual I invited him to try, his mornings began to change completely. Nothing difficult. He simply left a glass of warm water by his bed the night before. When he woke up, he drank it slowly, sip by sip, as if telling himself, "Good morning, brain. Let's have another good day together." Then he sat quietly for a moment, breathing in deeply, exhaling slowly. No complex routine. No intense meditation or exercise. Just exhaling. Like setting all worries aside so the blood could gently flow back to the brain. Then he used 2 fingertips to softly massage his forehead and the back of his neck, those places we often ignore unless they hurt. Just for a minute, as if he were gently waking up the small roads that bring blood to each memory. You see, there's nothing grand in those 3 minutes. But it was the calm consistency, repeated gently, that soothed even the driest, smallest vessels. Maybe you've once meant to do something good for your health. Then forgot. Then thought, another time is fine. I get it. Who hasn't? But if you allow yourself to begin again, not perfectly, just gently, then those 3 morning minutes might become the moment you truly meet yourself again. And you know what keeps this habit going the longest? Not discipline. Not the alarm clock. But a deep enough feeling that makes you want to protect it like a quiet gift to your own body. In the next part, I'll share that feeling with you and the reason why some people never skip their morning again. A lifetime habit not built on willpower, but on emotion. You know, I used to believe that if I gave clear, detailed, reasonable guidance, everyone would follow through. But the truth is, those who stick with a habit for life, they're not always the ones who understand it best. They're the ones who feel something deep enough, that they don't want to return to their old ways. I remember one day, Mr. Malcolm called me. Just to share. A morning when I forgot to drink water. It wasn't anything major. But his voice grew quiet. I felt like I missed an appointment with myself. And from that day on, he never forgot again. I don't think that was discipline. It was because he had attached the habit to a very personal feeling. One morning, he sat beside his wife's hospital bed. She had just experienced a mild stroke. As he watched her breathe heavily, he told me, "I can't control everything. But I can do one small thing to protect my brain so I can take care of her for many more years." See, it was that love, not knowledge, that made him never skip those 3 morning minutes again. And what about you? Maybe you don't have anyone to care for. Maybe you live alone. Or you think, "I'm not doing anything important anymore." But let me tell you something. You still have a memory worth preserving. A voice someone would love to hear. Eyes that bring peace to those you love. And a stream of blood flowing every day that helps you keep writing the story of a kind life for yourself. So, if you've ever failed to keep a good habit, don't blame yourself. Maybe you just haven't tied it to a reason that feels worthy enough to protect. A picture. A loved one. A memory. Or simply, I want to stay clear-headed so I can remember the name of the one I love most. And then I realized, when an older person chooses clarity from the first minute of their morning, they're not just saving themselves. They become the emotional anchor for the whole family, even if no one at home ever imagined. It all began with a glass of warm water. There was a 72-year-old man, who used to live quietly, nearly forgotten amidst the noise of his own home. And with just one small morning change, everything around him began to shift in a way no one expected. What happened? Why can one clear morning awaken even the coldest relationships? And how can you become the one who plants that change even at the age of 70? Let me tell you, right now. The one who kept the fire alive in a silent house. I once visited a patient named Mr. Harris, 72 years old, living in the northern suburbs of California. He lived with his son, daughter-in-law, and 2 young grandchildren, but the whole house was so quiet that I could hear the wind blowing through the window each morning. It wasn't because they didn't love each other. It's just that everyone was tired. Everyone was busy. Everyone lived in their own world. Mr. Harris once told me, "Doctor, you know, I feel like a decoration in the house. It's nice if I'm here. But no one would notice if I weren't." Then one morning, after coming back from a checkup, he started doing something I had once shared. He placed a glass of warm water next to his bed the night before. And the next morning, he woke up earlier than usual, drank that water in silence as if he were gently waking himself up. No one saw. No one praised him. It was just him and the quiet blood flowing through the tiny vessels of his brain. But something magical happened. On the 5th day, he poured another glass of water for his wife, who had barely spoken to him in years because of mild dementia. He placed it beside her bed, without a word. And that morning, she looked at him, picked up the glass, and smiled the first smile in a very long time. Then he started sitting down for breakfast with his grandchildren, even if only for a few minutes. No phones. No rush. Just an elderly man, fully present in his own kitchen. A few weeks later, the youngest grandchild wrote in a school essay, "Grandpa is the first one to wake up every morning. He's the one who makes our house feel warmer." I think he has some kind of morning magic, because since he started eating with us, Mom and Dad don't fight as much. You see, Mr. Harris didn't take expensive medicine, didn't do anything grand. He just started his day with clarity consistently as a way of telling life, "I'm still here. And I will live with the warmest heart I can." And that changed the rhythm of the entire household. I've witnessed many lives turn around simply because the morning began the right way. Not because I'm a doctor, but because I too have forgotten myself in rushed mornings. I've seen silver-haired elders shed tears because they wished they had slowed down just enough to hold on to their memory, their voice, and their love. If you're reading these lines, let this be a promise to yourself for tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning and the rest of your life. We've walked through a very special journey together, from a glass of warm water that seemed ordinary, to the quiet blood flow gently awakened, from those once forgotten in their own homes, to the moment they became the firekeepers through just one small morning habit. We've come to understand that drinking warm water after waking up doesn't just help blood flow to the brain. It's an act of self-love deep and lasting. Just 3 minutes in the morning could be the line between clarity and a health crisis. And that change doesn't come from willpower, but from a deep emotion strong enough to keep you from going back to old habits if you're still hesitating. Let tomorrow morning be a fresh start. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just be awake and fully present for yourself. Because you deserve not just a long life, but one that's clear-minded, connected, and deeply loved. If you found this helpful, please like the video, leave a comment, or share it with someone who needs to hear this. We read every single message, every word you share, because Thrive 60 Plus isn't just an information channel, it's a community where every person over 60 can begin again, with hope. And don't forget to hit subscribe, so you won't miss the next videos where we continue sharing real stories of healing and inspiration, just for you.